mache ich auch. Genau. Nee, ich bin schon live.
Okay, we'll get started. We'll get started with the discussion and are testing the translation system. So for those who listen, this is the translation.
Ich begrüße Sie.
Very warm welcome. 50 minutes discussion. Great to have you here. We have Maike Herrmann, literary agent. She works for Grafen in Berlin, and she has a lot of experience as a literary editor, offers workshops. Next to her, Joe Lendler, Karl Hanser Verlag Publishing House. Jürgen Schollnay, Hansa Berlin Verband, but she also is an author herself, so she speaks on behalf of the authors and the Authors Association, and she is a co-host. Our topic is making a living of your writing. 45-50 minutes, we like to highlight different aspects. My name is Hauke Hückstedt. I'm head of Literaturhaus Frankfurt am Main. But I am also speaking on behalf of the network of Literaturhäuser, literature houses in Germany and Switzerland. We don't like to tick off topics in 50 minutes and come up with the results. This will be impossible, so please bear with us. Our discussion will be just a very busy picture of structural challenges. Make a living with your writing. Everybody here on the podium seems to live very well with books, with writing, publishing, and working with literature. Lena Falkenhagen is first, and then I kindly ask you to present yourselves and talk about your situation. We talk about challenges. We not only talk about problems, but we'd also like to say what the situation is like. Lena Falkenhagen, from your point of view, what is the first problem, biggest problem we currently have as an author? Because one of the ideas is change after the pandemic. What was the situation like in 2019? What will it be like now? I'm not talking about artificial intelligence. We did so yesterday. It is one of the big topics this year at the book fair, and I think there are many, many events. So for the for cultural life, not only literature, it's a big challenge. The authors, for instance, that happened back in 2019. There were e-books, there was digitization, so it got stronger due to the pandemic. So you get lower prepayments for as an author, so you hardly know a situation. I started back in 2005. And I published before, but not as much as I do now, not on this professional level. Many authors have never experienced this situation. I write a book, publishing house will publish it, and I get some prepayment, especially from very smaller publishing houses. This is no longer happening. But you get higher royalty fees, so the percentage of the book's sales revenue sometimes is higher. So many projects are just the passion of the authors and the small publishing house. And for e-books, it's true too. A lot of books are not paid well enough. That's what I think. So very often you invest a lot of work. You spend hours writing it, but you see that not too many books are sold. But what you need is a minimum standard. So, Mara Wolf, I think you maybe have similar experiences, but you said I am self-publishing. So what do you think? Where is the moment where things turn or change? Well, I'm also the vice president of Madelia. That's the German authors and network for authors' rights. So I talk to a lot of authors, and they want to make a living or have to make a living of their writing. And the prepayments are getting lower and lower, down to a level where you say you cannot make a living. If you look at Künstlersozialkasse, KSK, it's like 24,000 euros per year. If you talk about 40 working hours per week, it's the minimum salary is lower. KSK figures from Künstlersozialkasse, that's the insurance company for artists and authors. And I was shocked to hear that young authors younger than 30 years of age earn even less, like 20,000, figures from back from 2021. I double-checked it. And if I think that the new adult genre that we currently have, I wonder how much authors are really making. And in self-publishing, one of the reasons I am publishing as a self-publisher is indeed you earn more money. So it's not true for each and every author. And it depends really on your literary genre. But I can control myself, what I do and how much I earn. It is a lot of money, of course. But making a living of your writing, that's our topic. So a lot of people make a living publishing houses, authors, booksellers, literary editors. So those who come up with the essence, really. I think it's, let me say, 80% cannot live well with their writing or of their writing. So we have like lighthouse projects, but I think like 80% cannot live well. So this brings me to Jo Lendler and Maike Hermann. So they help authors from the manuscript to the book. Is there a right? Do people feel entitled to live of their writing or being published? Lena Volkenhagen and myself, we met with Robert Habeck, the German Minister of the Economy, and we asked a similar question. And the answer was very clear, and it was wrong. Please remember, at the beginning of your career, no one made a promise you can make a living with as an author. It also is a very conscious decision for the liberal arts. It's different than being a salaried employee. That's a different life. Claudia Roth was there too. And she would have reacted differently. She would have asked questions like Social Security, how can a creative person get a pension? That was an interesting aspect. And these two people, Claudia Roth and Robert Habeck, that reminded me of the situation for us as publishing houses. We do both. We are a cultural institution and we are a company. So we have to harmonize both ideas. Do we invest in someone we believe in, and in the long run, suddenly we are successful because we have a strong, credible, plausible book suddenly is successful. And we have to say, we all live off the fact that things will be read, will be loved and used. And there is this participation, and the participation is very big for the publishing houses. Most books are loss-making. Most books we publish are loss-making, and other books we earn a lot, so we compensate for this, and we make some prepayments to authors. So we try to offer a large bandwidth of books. I cannot say that the prepayment is getting lower. It's been stable for the last couple of years. So what is currently increasing is not the participations or the royalties you get for a book, but we can see the prices are higher. So in absolute terms, we have higher prices. Maike Hermann felt like saying something. So Jo Lendler is the publisher and the literary agent is here. And I think it didn't get lower. Level was the same. Maike, you often talk to authors when they are just entering the book market. Very little experience, so you jointly look for something. That's the task of the you look for an agency, you look for a publishing house. So that's the task of the literary agencies. So how are your experiences? So let's think of the change we are currently experiencing. Yes, Jo Lendler, I think you are right. So the prepayments are stable, but they do not live up to the current inflation So it's not a downturn. I think we have to fight more. So situation is pretty stable. But I talk for my agency where we are working in a different field. And many authors get grants or get subsidies or are waiting for a literary award and hope to get one day. So I have a question. How do we get started? What is the perspective? How can we help people, for people who are just getting started? So situation didn't get worse. That's my experience. But so we see that people feel insecure. And we have this new orientation in the publishing houses, new challenges. We have this story you want to tell. And it looks pretty good. It is more difficult for a second or a third book. 15 years ago, I worked in a publishing house. At the beginning, in a literary publishing house, people had enough strength and stamina for 3 books. So they didn't say that's your security blanket, but that was the stamina you had. Is it worthwhile? And how much money did this book make? Today, it is not 2 or 3, it is 1 or 2 books. So 10, 15 years ago, there was some safety. You said, 10 years in this job, if you were able to survive economically with 2 or 3 books and the promotional system around it. This is no longer true. In my literary agency, very literary books, fiction books, we don't give a promise. We tell people, look for a side job or a main job. So that's a good thing. Just try to look after your finances. So we have to talk about it. We have to talk about the real problem. There are fewer readers, fewer people who buy books. It's not that it's not a problem with the publishing houses. It's not that they make a profit. It's rather fewer readers. So Lena Falkenhagen, you're the speaker of the authors who are having this association, more money. Yes. So the cultural politicians say you always want more money. So what are other solutions? Anything to make a living? Yes, everybody needs money to make a living and pay for their livelihood. As you said, well, books are more expensive. I wonder whether the authors are getting higher fees. I don't see it. And maybe we're talking about a different segment. I don't know, this high literature segment, fiction, but direct to ebook publishing, for instance, imprints of bigger. But when people don't pay a prepayment, and I personally think that's not nice. And in the next weeks and months, I want to see more and verify it. Also, companies like SMB publishing houses want a financial participation for their books. That's something. So we say, being a publisher, we see that we invest time as an author, the publishing house invests also money, and you create a book jointly. So I forgot your question, Hauke. So we're looking for money. People need money. Of course, are there any other approaches? Like the classical financing, like Gottfried Benn, who worked as a medical doctor, for instance. Obviously, some people have another day job, and maybe you've heard about it too. They have a day job, and they do something else to make a living. I think it is just not. It's just the second best solution, because I talk about professional authors who cannot make a living, who publish in big publishing houses, but who work in different areas, like. They get, for fantasy books, a lot of prepayments. It's 4.5, 5 months. I write the book, and I get this prepayment of 8,000 to 10,000 euros. It's not enough to live during that time. That is a reality that's been around for a long time. So more and more people say writing is my hobby. Some people have this mixed calculation when you say that authors sometimes do public readings. They should get payment for public readings. The Association of German Authors, we also have a recommendation like 500 euros per reading. Not everybody can get that much money. This sum is also interesting for the organizers. So 500 euro, 250 euros, so the author still earned a little bit more. Of course, that's this mixed calculation, and I think the Börsenverein talks about subsidies for very small publishing houses. They need support, they need subsidies, the very small publishing houses. So we should do this in conjunction with these guidelines for payments and salaries for authors. So promotion and subsidies, that's one thing, but we need a minimum standard that is being paid to the authors. And awards and grants is always something that helps a little bit. We say literature is culture, it's a cultural good, it's important for Germany, we'll subsidize it, we promote it, but it is a very small segment because the literature fund only says we have the top authors who get money, and we have small awards and prizes, but only for one person. So you just talked about it. You said maybe you can tell us a little bit about the time. We've discussed it. So state subsidies during the COVID pandemic in Neustadt Kultur.
Well, in the last 6 years, I've been a chairman of the Literary Fund board, which was exactly the time of the pandemic. And at the time, our urgent request for financial support has fallen on open ears. We didn't. It wasn't closed ears. Let's give you millions, and can you please give us proposals as to where we should put the money? And then, of course, you're naive and say, let's pass the money on to our authors. That was the first approach. But this is very short-term money, short-term assistance. As a first step, I think you have to water the landscape of which authors can live. So in the first few months, we gave money to those who organize readings in this country, disregarding the literary levels. So we had gardening books somewhere in the rural areas, or literature houses, as you have run one, because we realized a one-off payment, well, that's one thing, but this country and anyone who's writing there, they live off these readings and events. 50% of the money they make is made at these readings or events. And if this event landscape survives, then literature will have a chance of surviving too. And once this first bunch of money was paid out, then we went to direct subsidies to individuals. But I think it was a good thing for us as a literary country, as we regard ourselves, with a more or less working infrastructure, should do it as I said. And as I also would like to come back to the advances, advances having stayed the same. I think on the whole system has become more Darwinist. I'm talking about the sum total of advance payments made. And I would say that the system of which you must have heard, everyone, of mixed calculation, of mixed costing, that was stronger in the past. So we said everyone earn the money from one pot. The money goes into one pot, and everyone should be able to live off this one pot of money. This was the holy grail of publishers. That was a system we used for distribution of money, which of course is unjust against the bestseller authors. It's like a Robin Hood principle, giving the money more for the poorest. It's going to become more difficult. There are agencies, for example, they say, in this book, there's more money in this book, so there is some shift there and some redistribution, taking from the poor, giving to the rich now. But the sum total The bottom line still is, for the publishers I'm talking to, the system has remained the same, taking from the rich, giving to the poor. Of course, advances are part and parcel of publication anyway. Ms. Wolf, maybe in 10 or 20 years we need publishing houses in the first place. Is that the question to you? Well, I'd like to come back briefly on the subsidies for readings. As a network, we've just made a survey amongst our authors, and clearly there's been less money paid for readings, and the prices for readings have not risen after the pandemic. Of course, they have risen slightly. Just briefly, let me intervene there. We said we will only pay money if any reading which is made the money will at least be 500 euros. That was our condition for them to get money in the first place. Okay. The question is how this can be actually put in practice, this principle. But that was the result of the study, and also quite clearly, in this period, event organizers pick the the well-known names, the best names, because they were sure there will be enough audience coming to the readings, rather than having just 3 people coming to readings. Of course, it's very difficult. It's very hard to make this system more just. But the both of us are speaking on behalf of entertainments, not highbrow literature, and of course advances are getting worse. And also, you don't get much of a chance. In the past, you could say, I'm established with this publisher, and let's build something up together. And that's my impression. Many publishers, especially in entertainment or entertaining literature, don't have an interest in building or developing authors or building a brand, basically, because the risk is that this author may go away to some other publisher. So that's difficult. But this makes the whole system very fast-moving, and then quickly you would replace someone because the sales figures are going down. Will we need publishers in the future? Of course, you can ask this question. Of course, infrastructure is there for self-publishing. Of course, it's all lots of work. And for highbrow literature, I think it is necessary to have these publishing houses. But for entertainment literature, I think it's more of a question. And of course, many systems will become obsolete. Sometimes I'm dreaming about the authors' collectives, where you support each other and you give each other some tips. And I also believe we're talking about a shrinking reading community. I'm not so sure whether the printed book will go away in this segment. I'm talking about this, paperbacks. Of course, there is a boom now with decorative editions, and I think there will be some push there. And the normal book, which you find in the bookshops, may go away. And as authors, you can do lots of things yourselves because you don't have to print it. But your model also means that you are 24 hours a day working as an author or a publisher. If you're self-publishing, that's one disadvantage. Of course, that's the case for many self-employed people. And when I read or I listen to the quote by Robert Habeck, no one promised me I would be able to make a living of my arts. That's true, but if I do it 24/7, then the chances are better that I will be able to make a living. How can I go back to my idea? Since I have a publisher sitting next to me, I don't normally have an idea about the calculation basis. We have a stable number of titles. We have stable art advances. To what extent are there budgets moving towards marketing? And what we can see in many areas that authors have a big opportunity at the beginning because the publishers say, yes, this is the author we'd like to support for the first book. And if it goes belly up, then no problem. But have the marketing budgets risen? Maybe we should talk about the more commercial publishers rather than your publishing house. Unfortunately, I am rarely involved in making contracts for 6-digit figures or 5-digit figures, very rarely. But sometimes I hear This is really the entertainment area, of which I know very little. But then I hear what the marketing budget behind these titles, and that's certainly twice as much of the contract money. What is paid for that? So, of course, the marketing budget doesn't end up with the author at all, doesn't receive anything. But the pressure is so high that the marketing budget has to be so high so that the book has any chance of reaching the readers. And obviously, these proportions are not disproportionate at all. This balance is getting out of balance. More and more money for the top titles and less for the lower titles. But is this budget item rising in publishing houses as a reaction to insecurity? I wouldn't say that we are very representative, as you say, but I can also say that our total budget in advertising is stable. We have a huge shift from print to online. We have many more individual channels which we advertise towards, and maybe we're giving more money to the top sellers and not the general sellers. Publishers are, of course, try to be very just, and everyone gets the same. Everyone likes the small books. We need to have some budget for the small books, and I think we're becoming slightly stricter now. And the other big shift is, actually, if we had a first novel, we had an idea, we have to keep this on a small level, and we'll develop it very slowly but surely. This has changed. In the past, this made the first novels more difficult because we had the idea that the normal way is growing slowly from book to book. But now we've seen a situation where there is a large curiosity for first novels. So as you said before, people have an easier job for the first novel than for the second novel, second book. The second book rarely is bigger than the first one, and the consequence of it is that you tend to say, let's put all the money on the first book. Let's make sure that there is a brand established for this person, and then it was becoming more difficult later on. But the advantage is that first novels will be reported on in the media, and so it has a disadvantage and an advantage, this shift. Yep. We also can we hear from Mara Wolf whether marketing is an important share of your activities in your life? At least 50% of the work is marketing, certainly. 40%, 40 or 50%. And that's interesting that you're mentioning this, because in the past, authors weren't requested to do that. Now they should have a TikTok channel and Facebook channel, and they should, are supposed to dance through TikTok, but they're not paid for that. And they should do that before they sign a contract with a publisher. They are supposed to have a big community before they start. And that's something where we should say, well, you get this advance plus 5,000 euros advance for marketing, because you have to pay, you have to do some work for that, and this is really expected by the publishers, which is of course important. It's my biggest chunk of work apart from writing, but I'm doing it for myself. I would like to come in from my perspective as an organizer, also ask a question, because we notice there's a big market there, and there is a lot of blind spot in literature houses which we don't work for, as many other blind spots. I know how readings come about, and I work with publishers. Publishers have departments. They work with us very closely and say, this author has a new book. Do you want to run or organize a reading? But how about self-publishing? How about reading in a self-publishing business, a self-publishing author? Well, I have a person with Thalia, and I say I would like to go on a reading trip, and then she asks branches, and so he puts me on a 3-week travel journey. But tour rather. I've been publishing since 2011, so 12 years. So it's going a long way. My figures are good enough, so I can call someone and ask for a reading journey, a reading tour, and my money is actually paid for by the bookshop. So many people in the publishers don't want to build up, not develop an author, because it's what I did myself. I developed myself as an author brand, as a brand, and they rather really have a big turnover of new authors all the time. And we're listening to Mr. Alp Falkenhagen later on. I would just try to explain why this is so important for me. There is one fact in Germany when it comes to the reception, reading, publishing, and organizing readings, archiving literature, and I'm talking about Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. We are the market leader worldwide. Where else are we? Certainly in this sector. This is something, a responsibility for the future. And I think we can also tell now from the discussion that we shouldn't just administer this, we should invest more in this. We need to have very bright ideas for the next 10 years in order for this to be developed and to stay market leaders. Lena Falkenhagen, your point, and then afterwards I have a question for every one of you, and then we're done. Well, I would also like to contribute. Marketing budget, of course, is a big influence. Influences also the sales figures in the entertainment market. And I can hear lots of complaints there because it's only the top titles which are advertised and the smaller ones are not built up nor developed, as you say. So we rely increasingly on social media activities by the author. And of course, it's obvious that existing authors are strengthened. In a time of crisis, an entrepreneur tends to invest in a safe bank, in authors, big authors. So invest in Dan Brown and not Hannah Müller, who never has heard about. And as you mentioned, the author's brand, social media. That's in social media. You develop your brand yourself, and building up a name is very important long term. And also when you change publishers, for example, that's very important. I wanted to come back to a few points. I think the savings made are on the back of the authors frequently. If you say advances have stayed the same, that's maybe good in highbrow literature, but there is also a lack of inflation compensation. So if you get the same advances for over years, then the authors are losing out 3 to 5% per year in terms of their fees. And also I've brought some figures. Maybe I'm dumping too many figures on you. You can also correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not sure whether you're all authors or not, but do you realize how much the percentage is of the selling price which goes to various things? For example, printing costs 20%, and the wholesalers also get about 20%. 15% is gobbled up by the bookshop. Of course, they have to pay rent and staff costs and so on. That's very important for the book market. 30 or 40% of the 10 euros book goes to bookshops. And Amazon get discounts up to 65%. I'm hearing, which I find is completely unimaginable. And if you see the figures which the publisher has as a margin, it's maybe 10 or 15%. Correct me if I'm wrong. And the author gets a minimum fee of 10 or 5 or 10%, in the hardcover field 10 to 12, or if we're very good, 15% in terms of royalty. And I think that's completely out of proportion. If a wholesaler gets 15%, and of course bookshops make an important job. I don't want to drive down the bookshops, but the proportions are no longer right. If someone who's invested months of his life or her life into writing a book, and in the worst case they only get 5% of this money in a book, and if it's a 10-euro book, what happens if you have a 20 euros book? Are the margins the same, or will these be absolute values? And why does the wholesaler get 15% and not a fixed sum? Because delivering a hardcover book is not more work than a soft cover or a paperback. So there's something wrong there in terms of the proportions. Some people are nodding here. So that's the point where I would say it should be more than 5% or 8% or 6% of the money on the book for the author.
Well, I would like to talk about the questions I have for you. And at the end, we can talk a little bit about your comments. But I think that'll be very interesting for you, our audience. And I've got a list of things we should discuss. And let's try. So you, Mike, Joe Lendler said, well, maybe there might be a lot of diversity. Smaller publishing houses will be important. This might change. From your point of view as a literary agent, do you think the programs have changed? So what happens with the small independent, the indie book publishing houses and the bigger publishing houses? Well, what do I see? In my literary agency, I make contracts for the next 3 to 4 years. I'm not talking about the book of the future, but the next 3 to 4 years. So the very well-known literary companies, we have this shift towards a more commercial situation. I am back from the pre-book fair season where we'll meet the publishing houses, the entire bandwidth. So where we do all the contracts. I have this small literary publishing house and the bigger groups. So we have a similar impression. At the moment, I'm on alert because I think fiction, literature, avant-garde literature, people cannot afford to publish these types of books. So I think there will be a shift of these literary peaks towards the smaller and independent companies. So the indie companies currently said the independent publishing houses are often are not listed because apparently when we talk about the lists of the prize awards, Deutscher Buchpreis, Kantorpreis, etc., all the big awards, they do not have the indie publishing houses on the list. If you look at Leipzig Book Fair for Mikotext, for the awards, the Germany Fairy Tale Deutschland Märchen, and at the very beginning it was a very well-known perception. In spring of this year, the bigger houses said nothing worked out. So Stuckrad Barre was a favorite author, but the smaller publishing houses were seen this year. So during the year, I don't know. I think they did pretty well during the year. And they simply want attention, but it's not very representative. And in my work at the moment with young authors, I cannot always say, well, such and such publishing house, like Random House, Luchterhand, is the publishing house that will help you and makes your book well known. Maybe it's better to have a small indie publishing house, and maybe they can organize more public readings. So even this has changed. And when we talk about prepayments or advances, we're not talking about a big 5-digit sum, and we talk about advances of 10,000, 12,000 euros that you have to earn. So the sum is not too big. We talk about smaller and indie, 1,000 to 3,000, 4,000, 6,000. That's all they can afford. But it's not a bigger order of magnitude as opposed to what we have with the bigger publishing houses. Mara Wolf. Just look like down from a satellite to this industry. Some people are missing. And of course, the translators should be here. The booksellers should be here. I'm the moderator only. So that's a lot. But all the stakeholders should be here, all the interested parties and stakeholders. Where are the biggest dysfunctions from your point of view? Well, the biggest dysfunction really is many authors would like to sell their books and they would like to get a good salary. And as Lena said, not very logical for us as authors. It doesn't seem logical at all. Now that I'm looking into all the details myself, I understand how much money the publishing houses have to pay, so I have books printed. But it's a lack of acknowledgement of what we're doing. So you don't understand what is being invoiced and not, and what is being paid. So it's not very clear for the authors, and the money they get is they don't really know how much the printer is, etc. So not very easy. Everything has to be paid for, And if you work with a publishing house, if you want to continue working with this publishing house, you always look at print sales, but we always know that ebooks are selling pretty well too. And sometimes the publishing house earns more with an ebook than with a print book. So you need a better cooperation with the authors so that you really work on a level playing field. Yes, I like to say something. I talk to the authors, and looking at the very beginning as an organizer for the authors, oftentimes something has changed. More and more authors proactively contact me. And if you have to tell an author, no, we have no space for you. But what I sometimes would like to tell an author, if all authors would attend readings, all the readings would be very well attended. So if everybody who likes to or loves to write would also buy a lot of books, I think the whole publishing industry would be flourishing if all the authors would also buy books and read a lot. Jo Ländler. So a publishing house has a lot of departments, and they have the management, they have bookkeeping. Do things change, or is it stable, or is marketing in the meantime the boss in the house? So how about the cooperation? A lot of things have changed, like marketing has changed. As I said before, other channels are here now, important channels. So we understand that people who have the print books are no longer here, or the big newspapers like Frankfurter Allgemeine who have a big advertising and have a special, or that they write a lot of articles about new books. I don't know. So I think a publishing house is like very slow, creeping slowly, and they don't change overnight. And the day and age of the big specials from the big newspapers on publishing and the new publishing era is over. So all the events change. The reality is changing. Many people have their own booking agents who help them to continue towards self-publishing, and they say, I don't need your event department, you're not fast enough, you don't have the cool clubs, the cool nightclubs who book me as an author for a reading. So of course this is missing, this is completely changing. The sales department works differently. So sales channels are changing completely. So I think harmonization and balance in the house, publishing houses seems to be different. On a slightly lighter note, so one thing is here to change. This big trend will change us fundamentally. In the Netherlands, the publishing world is different, is over, because nobody reads in the Dutch language. So no, don't try. As a literary agent of an author from the US, don't try and find a publishing house in the Netherlands. It's gone. Everybody reads in English. So that is something that'll be stronger here. Harry Potter's Revenge in Germany. People read in English. It is very good. As a person in private, it's good. As a owner of a publishing house, it's getting more and more difficult to publish English-speaking literature. The good thing about it is, if you write in the German language, you are welcome, more than ever, by the way. We warmly welcome German-speaking authors. We need someone who writes in the Tamil language. No one can read it in the original. Or we need you as the German-speaking authors of German-speaking original literature. That sounds good. Last question for Lena Falkenhagen, a young author. So you are the head of the Association of German-Speaking Authors, a young author, would love to write. Says, I have a first draft, for instance, and the young author would like to see themselves published. And later on they would make a living of their writing. What would you say to this young author? Any tips and recommendations? It's bitter. Don't do as I do. So university graduate and then immediately start as an author and a self-employed author. So on a private note, have a second leg. And the second leg for me was 7 years. I lived off my writing and I translated and I did literary editing. And then, as a second thing afterwards, I started to work in the games industry because writing and an author, this was tiring and it was very stressful. So I started working in the games industry. I wrote this computer game. And now I do both. That's nice to have both things. But for a young author, it is very difficult. First of all, please become a member of the Association of German Authors, because we are the people who try to help you with the policy of fees. So we speak on behalf of young authors. We want you to earn money and get good fees. Get informed. Be in communities. We have writers, communities, and other meetups. So Facebook, nobody uses Facebook anymore. It shows my true age. I'm mentioning Facebook, but I am from the market where I worked with bigger publishing houses. So you should work with a literary agent. The literary agent can do more for you. You will earn a little bit more than you think at first. Or they will tell you this book won't be successful. Okay, so that's what we learned. Because literary agents have the know-how and can help you. Can help you to have a good contract and have good fees. Apart from that, you just don't write for free. You don't do a reading for free. You don't write for free. Even if you write a short story, you should get a fee for the short story. You don't work for nothing. Don't work for free. That's a nice final word. Don't write for nothing. Don't write and work free of charge. And if you work with a publishing house, get in advance. Don't say that you have a day job somewhere else. Never work without charging. Very difficult to change the situation, and we have these very low prepayments and advances, and destroys our own market. And of course, you dream and have ideas. Young people have ideas and say, we will publish you, but we won't pay, and they play games with you. So we don't want to destroy our own market. And if you talk to a publishing house, get information. And don't work with a publishing house that asks you to pay for publishing you. And then you will never get paid, because this is a scam. And Yolanda would say, a library is a nice thing, but the booksellers have their advantages too. So don't do a public reading for nothing. So thank you to all our participants. Thank you, dear audience, for your kind participation. So attend as many events, attend parties if you want to. Literaturhaus Frankfurt has a party, free access, and with your access fee, you support the indie publishing houses. Thank you, Maike Hammann, Jo Ländle. Have a nice day, all of you. Thank you.